Alright, hi everyone. So I would like to use this video to explain and demonstrate how you can use Google Scholar to help you identify the measurement items for your survey. So if you are doing quantitative research and you need survey items, oftentimes there's a temptation to think like, what is it that I want to ask in my survey, and then just write down some questions. So for example, in this video I'll use emotional intelligence as the construct, and let's say I want to measure emotional intelligence by saying, are you emotionally intelligent, right, or something like that, or on a scale of 1 to 5, so say 1 not at all to 5 completely. Please indicate your level, or you can say like, please indicate your level of emotional intelligence, and then I consider myself to be emotionally intelligent, for instance. And then you're like, well, okay, that's not really not at all or completely. That's more like strongly disagree to 5, strongly agree. And then the problem with that is, first of all, emotional intelligence, or most constructs that we're using for our papers, have already been measured in other studies. There's likely going to be well-cited research that have already figured out how do you measure emotional intelligence, remembering that this is a latent construct. Latent meaning hidden or unobservable. You can't see emotional intelligence. So this isn't a good item, because what would end up happening if I were taking a survey and I came across the line, I consider myself to be emotionally intelligent, I'll butcher that. I have no idea what that really refers to, right? So you might think, well, that's obvious. Emotional intelligence is about being considerate or something. So then you might try to instead of using that, you might think you've got it figured out. So I consider myself to be a considerate person, and then strongly disagree, strongly agree, and again, it's from me. Maybe it's possible, like, definitely they'll be more likely to answer that question or statement, right? 1 to 5. But the problem now is the bridge between this item and this construct. So is emotional intelligence really measured based on this? And even if it is, we don't know if that's the whole list. Maybe it's also about being apathetic, or attuned to others' needs. We don't know, right? And so we might be thinking that we could figure it out, or you might even go to like emotional intelligence, right? Models of emotional intelligence, and you find a paper and you read it and you're like, okay, let me see, how do they measure, or how do they define emotional intelligence? Appraisal and expression of emotion, regulation of emotions, utilization of emotions. So let's say emotional intelligence is actually, I am able to regulate my emotions. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. In this one I would say myself, but supported by Neubauer and Freudenthaler, and whenever, the year, right? So that's closer. You're getting closer to what we need. The problem, though, is that we have to really, let me just wrap the text here. We have to really make sure that we are accurately defining these things, okay? And we're not just relying on our interpretation of what's been written about it. Although this is a great resource, and actually I just want to point out that if you look here, 899 citations, this is very likely going to lead us to those scales or those items. So if you kept reading, you might notice here, models and measures provided by Meyer and colleagues are hitherto the only published ability models of EI. Interesting. In the present review, blah, 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 trait EI concept, mixed describes the fact that EI is viewed as a collection, all sorts of things. So right here I want to point out, so first is this idea of a multi-factor emotional intelligence scale. Wonderful. So what we could do is copy that, go back to Google Scholar, put that here. Look at that. Multi-factor emotional scale. And oh, look at that, a review and critique of emotional intelligence measures. Wonderful. What you could do even without limiting it is just put emotional intelligence scale. Let's see what comes up. 2010. Again, it's got lots of citations, validity and reliability of a brief emotional intelligence scale. Great. So we have a brief one. Chinese university students. So there's a specific context that might be useful. There's that review and critique. And this one had low reliability. Well, this one has, let's see if it's any better. So this study describes the development and validation of a brief self-report measure of emotional intelligence. And what did they find? Offers a valid and reliable measurement tool. All right, great. Let's find those items. So usually, if we're lucky, we'll scroll down and we'll see something like this. So here we go. Table 2, item factor loadings and error variances for competing models. These are our potential measurement items. Now, don't just grab all of them because some of them might have low factor loadings. Like 0.49 here isn't a good factor loading, right? Generally 0.6 and above is good, and sometimes we'll take 0.5 if it's exploratory research. Well, if you keep scrolling down, you'll see the next table. They've basically summarized their own results and created what they would argue as the best way to measure emotional intelligence. So here's our list. So appraisal of own emotions. I know why my emotions change. All right. So what we can do is take that, put it here. I know why my emotions change. Okay. We're measuring that. Now the other thing is, let's see what scale they did. So we don't want to choose the wrong scale. They have 3.52. Everything looks. This is probably a 1 to 5 scale, but let's make sure because you never want to assume. Usually, without having to read the whole thing, you can just put 5 point. Yeah. 16 items are rated on a 5-point Likert scale anchored by 1, strongly agree, to 5, strongly disagree. That's so important. 1 item is even reverse scored. So look at our scale. 1 strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. If we didn't look at that, we would misinterpret their data. So we need to make sure we specify exactly how they have defined their scale. Okay, 1 strongly agree to 5 strongly disagree. All right, and our source, now that we have not just made it up, we would come back. Where's the here? We can just find the DOI for this article, copy that, and just put it there. All right, so there we have a source. You can also put the citation if you want. Google Scholar's nice because it gives you this, so you can do that, whatever you need. Oh. Right, whatever. Oh, I clicked it. Cool. Okay, so whatever you want. I like the link because then I can get directly to it, but it's up to you. And there we go. So that is a good one. These are bad because we made them up. This one is better, but still not good. Oh, that's an ugly color here. Let me. But not good because you still just made it up, but it's still based on something, which is good. This is great. Okay, so I am going to delete these and keep working from this list. So then I go back into my article, or into that article, sorry, emotional intelligence, no, sorry, validity, reliability. Go back to that table, and I'm going to do the same thing for the ones that are what I need to use in my studies. So they have divided their emotional intelligence items into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different dimensions. And then each dimension has 2 subdimensions, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay? So you don't need to take this part because that's not an item, that's just a category. But I would take basically all of these. Copy, paste. I easily recognize my emotions as I experience them. I can tell how people are feeling by listening to the tone of their voice, and so on. Okay, so you'd go through and you'd get all 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 items, list them all out here, make sure you've named each one emotional intelligence all the way down the list, make sure you're using the same scale that they have, and the source remains the same for each of these. Okay, if you wanted to take another item, so say you like that, you think that'll work, but you want one more, or you want it in another context, you could also say we click on this one, and we go down again, find the scales. They have emotional intelligence scales. Here's Shoot, 8 tall, 1998. Has been used in a number of studies. However, the largest problem is the structure. Interesting. So it looks like they've thought a lot about it. So let's see what they did. So again, go kind of from the bottom up. Look for those items here. So theirs isn't summarized in a table, but they've used basically this here. So EIS, Emotional Intelligence Scale, contains 33 items and has a unidimensional self-report measure of EI. All right. So anyways, you go through this and kind of validate what you've put here to consider sort of how yours would relate. Would have been nice to. Sometimes they have the scale in the appendix as well, but otherwise not. Maybe I'll pick one more here. 2008. You could also look for more recent papers. That usually is quite helpful as well. So let's say 168 citations. Oh, MDPI, rather not. Nursing students, like any context is fine unless that's really important. So here, let's pick this one for example, and find the items. These are studies. What you can do is search for the word items, item, measure. TMMS 24 scale. Alright. So yeah, if you're not finding good scales in the studies, then I mean you just have to kind of keep looking and validate it. But it looks like we found a good one anyways for this. So I would say that's going to be your best list. Those 8 or 10 items, sorry, in total from this study. And there you go. So there you have a good use of emotional intelligence. The last thing I want to mention is if you're adapting it, because we've adopted those. There's 2 different ways you can treat measurement items. Adopting, meaning you're keeping it identical to what it says, and adapting, meaning you're changing something in it. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to, instead of people, like say you're doing a project, you're looking at employees' perceptions of, or a manager's perceptions of employees' emotional intelligence, you could change a word people and then in square brackets put hospital or front desk employees or hotel employees are feeling by listening to the tone of their voice, right? So this shows in square brackets, and you can bold it or italic or whatever you want, just to show that you've changed it. This is called an adapted item. Okay, so we can see what has changed, and you can also have a note to say what the original looked like. All right, so I hope that was helpful. Again, this is very important to ground your items in the existing literature, because otherwise we're starting from scratch making things up. You don't need to do that. And then when we measure these in our survey, we'll know that these have been tested for validity, reliability, and that we have no concerns about the items themselves reflecting the construct. And then it just comes down to making sure that we don't have any problems with validity and reliability across the constructs. So that's a separate conversation. All right. Thank you. I hope that was helpful.